Hello, my name's Chris, and for the last 6 to 8 months or so, I've been doing an overland trip across the country, living out of and driving this vehicle, which is a 2011 Nissan Xterra Pro-4x trim model. And I wanted to do a review on it. So for those of you who might be wanting to do something like this and are trying to consider what vehicle you might get for the trip, I thought this might be helpful. So a little bit of background, I always did want a Nissan Xterra. I just think they look cool. Nissan doesn't make them anymore. I think they stopped in 2015. And I think there's rumors that they might actually bring the Xterra back, but to this present day, they are not available new. But overall, I'm really happy with it. And so with this review, what I want to do is kind of do a broad overview of the reasons you might consider a Nissan Xterra, and specifically a Pro-4x trim model for your overland trip. But then also on the back end of the video, want to do break it down a little bit further and talk about city, highway, and off-pavement performance. And I think all of that together will give you a pretty good base to work off of when you're deciding if you wanted to get a Nissan Xterra or not. I think overall it's a great value. I really actually liked Toyota 4Runners, and the way I describe this is I feel like it's kind of a poorer man's 4Runner. I paid $12,500 plus tax and all that crap, and that was again for a 2011 Nissan Xterra Pro 4X, which is the highest kind of off-road trim package that they offer, and it had 78,000 miles on it, and so I felt like that's a good deal. These things, the engine is really capable, so it'll run if you take care of it for many more miles than it has on it right now. And by the way, it's just about to touch 100,000. So they're really, really, really reliable. I haven't, knock on wood, had any trouble with it. I had to fix a connection on the battery. There was some corrosion there. Other than that, I haven't had to do anything to it. And like I said, I've driven it for over 20,000 miles inside of 12 months. So they have a really good reputation. So although Toyota kind of has the gold standard for reliability, Nissan Xterras are definitely something to consider as well. And a podcast that I listened to, Overland Journal podcast, they were doing a review of different overlanding vehicles, and they were lamenting the fact that they don't make Nissan Xterras anymore, which made me very happy because they also felt like I do that it is a pretty good thing to consider if you're going to do an overlanding trip. So some of the reasons you might consider a Nissan Xterra is the payload's pretty good. I don't have it in front of me, but I think it's around 1,500 pounds. It's built on a Nissan Frontier platform, so it drives like a truck, but that also means you can do a lot with it. And so it's pretty sturdy. I've put a lot of weight into it, and it still drives pretty well, and we'll get into a little bit more specific down the road on this video. It also has a lot of storage. There's a compartment up here that I unfortunately can't use because I have a rooftop tent on top of it, but that's pretty nice, and that comes standard with all the Nissan Xterras. And it also has a roof rack that comes stock, which was very handy for me because that meant that I didn't have to go find an aftermarket roof rack for the rooftop tent, and that has come in very handy. As far as the Pro 4X trim package, which again is the highest one, there are some nice features that come with it. A couple things. One are these fog lights, which I haven't really used, but they would be handy if you're at a campsite and you need to really light up the place, or if you're really off the beaten path and need to get some extra light on the trail, that would be handy. There's also underneath the drivetrain, there's skid plates that cover all the important stuff down there, and that has come in handy for me because I've had a couple times where I could hear it skidding along some rocks or hard surface that I was driving on top of. It usually comes with leather seats, which for some reason this is the only Pro 4X that I looked at that actually didn't have the leather seats, which was fine with me. And then the last thing is it's roomy. I ripped out the back seat. By the way, you can fit 5. It has a full-size back seat. And I ripped that out and, as you can see, built a kind of a living platform in there around my fridge. And that's been great for me. It's big enough that you can actually sleep on that. So I have slept on that platform that I built before. So it is capable. It is very roomy on the interior, and there's lots of little secret, not so secret, but little places where you can put a lot of stuff and really fill it out. So definitely a good point about the Nissan Xterra 2 is that it is nice and roomy. So those are some of the things that you might like just from a broad level about the Nissan Xterra Pro-4x. But now I want to get into a little bit more looking at city, highway, and off-pavement capabilities and the pros and cons for each of those. All right, so the first that we'll look at is the Nissan Xterra's performance in the city, which is definitely, in my opinion, the worst. So for each of these 3 areas, I just gave it a ranking out of 10, and I would give this a 4 out of 10. On the good side, it's a mid-size vehicle, so it's pretty good. You can get it in and out of tight spaces in the city, especially large cities where parking is an issue. It has pretty good handling too, which I actually just had a near incident driving today, where a car was going to pull out and I had to literally just do one of these, and was very happy with the way that it responded to the quick maneuver. But that's about as good as I can find on the pros side for this. Unfortunately for the city, the cons definitely outweigh the pros. It's really not what it's, built to do, but unfortunately, if you're going to have it, you're going to have to drive it in the cities most likely. So the rear suspension on this is very clunky, and I reached out to a guy who does an Xterra based overlanding podcast, and he has the same problem. It's really common. The rear leaf springs, part of the suspension, just aren't up to scratch, and he got some aftermarket ones and put them on himself, and he said it solves the problem. But if you don't have them, anytime you're going over serious potholes, the bottom kind of bangs against the frame, and it's pretty annoying. So it's not really an issue off the pavement or on the highway, but in the city, it will drive you nuts unless you do something to beef up the rear suspension. Another thing, and I knew this getting into it, but the gas mileage, especially in the city, is pretty bad. It's not a complete disaster, but it's definitely not good. I feel like for me, driving in the city exclusively, I'm probably going to get around 15 miles a gallon. So it is what it is. Again, it's built on a truck platform, so it drives like a truck, and it gets gas mileage like a truck as well. So overall, for the city, I would give this a 4 out of 10. It's not built for that, but there is times when you have to drive it in a city, so it comes with the territory. All right, so next, talking about how it does on the highway, I gave this one a 7 out of 10. It definitely, is not awesome, but it's certainly capable on the highway, and it's not cumbersome. It's really smooth, actually. As long as there's not any serious pothole issues on the highway, it's going to drive relatively smooth. I don't feel encumbered when I'm driving it. It's fine. It's quiet for the most part. I do have the rooftop tent up there, and so you can, if you have the windows down, hear a slight bit of whistling, but that's not really the truck's fault at all. And then it does have a pretty powerful engine. I'm not sure about all the specs because I don't have those on me, but I know it's a relatively capable V6 engine, and so especially if I'm on level ground, I find it to be pretty peppy and have plenty of punch. And then the gas is better, like it usually would be on the highway. I found, whether I have the rooftop tent on or not, somewhere between about 17 to 20 miles per gallon on the highway, which again isn't great, but that's not the strong suit of this truck anyway. So overall, it's an improvement for sure over what it gets in the city. On the cons, I've definitely noticed that going up hills, it feels not responsive at all. Like I really have to give it a lot of throttle to get it going and to keep its cruise control. I drove a first generation Xterra. I test drove it, and I couldn't believe how unresponsive it was when I would floor it, and it would like literally think about it for a second, and then it would start to gradually increase speed. This is much better. The engine's much more capable in the second generation. but it's still uphills. It needs some time to think about how to respond after you gas it. So it's not a deal breaker, but it's certainly an area of highway performance where it definitely struggles. And then the gas mileage, again, you know, it's an improvement over the city, but it's still not great. But for a truck, pretty respectable.
Okay, so I saved the best for last. Like I mentioned before, in my opinion, this thing is built for off-pavement activities, and that's where you'll get the most value if you do get one. And so as far as off-road or off-pavement capabilities, I would give this a 9 out of 10. I have a Jeep Wrangler back where I live in Hawaii, and this stacks up just as good to that Jeep Wrangler Sport that I have down there. So I feel it's just as capable in this as I do my Jeep back home. There's a couple, basically it's all about the four-wheel drive. Even though I don't have to use it very often, it's almost like this thing is built to handle tough terrain without even having to do anything to flip any switches, to really do anything to handle it manually, which is awesome. So down here is your controls, the four things that you would look at to help you with any kind of off-pavement activity. The four-wheel drive's right here. It's just a switch. It's super easy to go into 4 high or 4 low, and all you have to do is just get stopped and throw it into neutral, make your switch, and then get back into drive, and you're set. They have what's called a vehicle dynamic control system, and that goes at all times unless you actually turn it off. So that button down there actually turns it off. And what the vehicle dynamic control system is intended to do is basically assist you in driving and protect from understeer or oversteer, and most importantly, distribute the power in your wheels depending on where it's slipping. So a lot of times I'll see the slip notification come on my dashboard, and that means that the vehicle dynamic control system is actually working to help get the power into whichever wheel needs the help. And so that's kind of nice. So a lot of times if I'm driving on tough terrain, I don't even switch it to four-wheel drive, because that system actually enables me to go far and do a lot of stuff without even having to do anything myself. Another thing, which I haven't even used it, is the hill descent control. So I think most people are familiar with this, but if you're going down a hill, if you don't want to just worry about steering, you can just throw that button on and it'll keep it at, you know, the appropriate rate of knots, as it were, going down a hill. So all you have to do is worry about the steering wheel. And then finally, I've also never used this before, but that's the rear lock differential button, which is awesome feature to have. So you can put that on and it'll help even out the power distribution on your rear axle to make it easier to get out of spaces without having to put your four-wheel drive on. But again, that vehicle dynamic control system works so well that I haven't even ever have to use it. And then hopefully you can see behind me the tire grips. If I hopefully never will need them, and I haven't so far. I've driven over sand, I've driven over snow, I've driven in rainy conditions, I've driven in gravel, uphill, pretty much everything you know, that you would imagine someone getting stuck in. And I haven't really ever felt totally nervous that I was going to get stuck. Probably, knock on wood, I'll probably get stuck tomorrow. But yeah, I think this is where this thing is actually intended to live, is off the beaten path and off pavement. And so I would give it my highest mark, 9 out of 10. The only con that I can come up with is that rear suspension is still clunky. And so sometimes you will kind of bottom out the back end if you have passengers or a lot of gear in the back, or a rooftop tent on top like I do. But that's really the only con that I can come up with. Otherwise, there's really nothing to not like about the off-road performance of this vehicle.
All right, so that's it for my review on the Nissan Xterra Pro-4x as an overland vehicle. By all means, leave any comments if you notice something throughout the course of this video that you think I should know about, or if you have any questions, I'd be happy to help. I would say in parting that I do think that this would be best for someone who plans on doing a lot of overland travel but not cross country because of the gas mileage. If you're planning on doing a lot of weekend trips near to where you live and going to be off the pavement a lot, this would be really perfect for that. But for super long distances like I'm doing, especially when gas prices get high, that can be problematic. And then the only other thing I would point out is that there's lots of companies springing up that do overland vehicle renting. So maybe take a look at a company that offers an Xterra, and go grab a Tacoma or a 4Runner or a TJ or something like that, and take those out on the road and take them out for a weekend and see how they stack up. I didn't have the luxury of doing that because I live all the way in Hawaii and I had to get something on the mainland. So I just took a chance, and overall very, very happy, although it's not without its drawbacks. But anyway, overall, very happy with the purchase. And like I said, if you have any questions, just let me know.